Hello, Jets fans, and welcome to another episode of Rich Sports Talk, your home for all the latest and greatest on the New York Jets. And it was an eventful day at the owners' meeting as Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas addressed the media and addressed one of the hottest rumors in the NFL right now. Hello, everyone. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button, give us a like so you don't miss any of our upcoming live streams. If you're joining us after the live stream, you're catching us on demand. Hey, still give us a like, give us a subscribe. And if you have any questions about the Jets, put them in the chat. And also check out our community page on YouTube. We currently have a fun poll up for you guys. Who would you rather have the Jets trade for? Lamar Jackson or Aaron Rodgers? And let's start off with the biggest story in the NFL, and that is Lamar Jackson going scorched earth on the Baltimore Ravens and basically putting it out there on Twitter that he officially requested a trade on March 2nd, and that he wants to be gone from the Ravens. Now, of course, you knew the Jets were going to be asked about this because they're in the market for a quarterback. And Joe Douglas, when asked, said, "We're staying on the path we are on." And basically went further to say that they are staying on the path and that they are taking the high road. And look, I give the Jets a lot of credit. I think that they are handling this incredibly well. And look, they dropped some hints too. Joe Douglas saying they're interested in Ben Jones, who I think would be a great upgrade at the center position. Also saying the more weapons, the better in terms of the Odell Beckham Jr. pursuit. And look, I think Odell Beckham Jr. will be a player that this team really pursues. And look, I understand that there's frustration with the Packers. There have been some productive conversation, but there's no hard deadline in terms of what Joe Douglas said yesterday. So I get a lot of Jet fans wanting the Lamar Jackson, like basically coming out of the woodwork saying, "Hey, Lamar Jackson wants a trade." But I've been saying this for months that yes, the Aaron Rodgers is taking longer than most Jet fans would like. That the Lamar Jackson situation has so many more hurdles to get through. There's so much to get through, and I think it's going to take a while to figure all of this information out. But at the end of the day, it is clear that the Jets have made a plan. They know what their plan is, and they understand what they are going to do. The Jets know that they have to win next year, and Aaron Rodgers in this system gives them the best chance to win. Now, it also was revealing when Robert Saleh was asked about the future of Zach Wilson, and basically said yesterday that Zach Wilson is quarterback 2, which tells you that they are expecting a new QB1 next year, but Zach Wilson will be the backup. Folks, it is clear that the Jets have a plan in mind. That plan right now is Aaron Rodgers for a season or two, and it buys them time to do the following, which is see if they can salvage Zach Wilson. And I understand I'm going to probably see a lot of comments fill up the chat right now, and I will get to your comments in a minute. Again, guys, if you want to comment, please let me know, ask any of your questions, and I will answer them in a few minutes. But it's clear the Jets still feel that there is a high ceiling for Zach Wilson. And I know most Jet fans never want to see Zach Wilson on a football field again. I get it. But the thing is, every NFL draft gives you 15 to 20 really great and unique talents. And Zach Wilson was one of those talents. You don't want to just simply throw it away and give up. And there is a lot to still like about Zach. There is still the big arm. There's still the off-schedule plays that he can make. And the hope is that sitting behind Rodgers, the guy he idolized, the guy that he wants to play like, will help him develop. But more importantly, it gives the Jets time to evaluate him in practice. And if Zach Wilson this training camp and this year is in camp and he's bouncing screen passes and he's overthrowing receivers on crossing routes, and if he can't hit the quick slants, it's going to give the Jets to go, okay, we need to look at another long-term quarterback. They're not drafting one this year, but it buys the Jets time to evaluate and make a decision. And the other thing that we have to keep in mind as well is with Aaron Rodgers, if the Jets win the next 2 seasons with Aaron Rodgers, it makes them an attractive location for maybe another quarterback that wants to move. Maybe another quarterback, a young quarterback that's like Lamar, not getting the contract he feels is fair. It's all about making yourself as presentable as possible. And if the Jets with Aaron Rodgers, even if they don't win a Super Bowl, but the Rodgers Jets gets to back-to-back AFC championship games, let's just throw a hypothetical out there. And one of these quarterbacks looks at the Jets and goes, they have a great defense. They have a great roster. They have an opportunity to win. Or if Rodgers is here for 2 years, you could also do the following. You know, Rodgers has 1 year left. You can go and draft a quarterback in a better quarterback class next year and have that quarterback sit. Because another interesting thing that happens in 2 years is that the Jets, who have a lot of great young talent, all of a sudden that young talent is going to have to get paid. You have to pay Sauce Gardner, Breece Hall, Jermaine Johnson. There is a lot to do there. And when you have to pay that talent, it might behoove the Jets at that point to play a rookie on a rookie deal. So the Jets have a lot of options. And really, a lot of people look at the 2 years as a negative for Rodgers, or even 1 season. But for me, Rodgers, even at this age, gives the Jets actually the most flexibility and the most options at quarterback. Because if you go and get Lamar, you are committing to him for 4 to 5 years. You are making him your quarterback. You are trading an abundance of draft picks. And on top of that, you are trading for an asset that you worry about getting hurt, that has had health issues, that has missed the end of the season the last 2 years. And, oh, by the way, hasn't done great in the playoffs. I know Rodgers hasn't done great the last couple of years either, but Jackson has struggled even more. And part of it's his playing style. It's great in September and October, running around making plays. And this is one of the reasons why I did not want the Jets to draft Justin Fields. As much as I love Fields' talent, the problem you get into with those dynamic quarterbacks that run around and rely on their legs to be their main weapon, by the time you get to November and December, they're worn out, they're gassed, they're tired, they're not at 100%, they're nicked up, they're banged up. And by the time you get to the playoffs, you need some juice, and they don't have the juice at that point in the season. Going to get into your comments a little bit. One other interesting factor was the roster construction. And I know OBJ is today, he's at the owners' meetings bumping shoulders with everyone. If we get any updates, I'll let you know. But I thought it was very interesting because 2 Jets that we've talked about on this channel a lot, and when I went through my offseason preview, I mentioned this, were Carl Lawson and Corey Davis. Now, it was very interesting because Robert Saleh talked about them both being on the roster, but the one that really stuck out for me was Carl Lawson, basically saying he's not going anywhere and pass rushers don't grow on trees. I always felt Lawson would be back with the Jets. I'm curious to see if they'll restructure the contract potentially with him. But Lawson was going to be a tough player to replace, whether through free agency or the draft. And I want to see Jermaine Johnson and Bryce Huff get more opportunities too. But Carl Lawson had a productive season last year coming off the Achilles. And they usually say when you're coming off an Achilles, it's really 2 years until you're back to full strength. So this could be the best Carl Lawson we get next year. And I don't have a problem because the Jets really need to beef up the interior defensive line. They need some speed at the linebacker position. Safety still a concern. There's other needs on this team, and if they don't have to get a pass rusher, I think that is a great decision. The other interesting one was Corey Davis. And while Saleh did talk glowingly about Davis, it wasn't a sense that he's going to be back. For now, it seems Corey Davis is sticking around. I also wonder if he will get a contract structure. And look, I know a lot of Jet fans would have rather kept Elijah Moore over Corey Davis. I don't personally love Corey Davis, where he's missed half of the games potentially for the Jets with injuries. I mean, Carl Lawson missed them all, but he had an Achilles injury and missed a whole season. So I'm not the biggest Corey Davis fan. I do think as a number 3 or 4, he's a great option on this team. But I'm also curious. I don't think the Packers are going to trade for him. I'm thinking maybe the Jets are hoping that they can get a trade out of this. But it will be interesting to see. I think Corey Davis is still a decent option. He still is a good addition to that wide receiver room. But it'll be fascinating, especially if this team brings on OBJ. If OBJ's on this team, I don't think Corey Davis is, because you cannot be paying receivers that much to basically be role players. And the thing, too, with Davis is I'm curious if the Jets maybe try to hold them through training camp and just see if maybe you can get a better evaluation before the season. Like if some team's number 1 or 2 receiver goes down, they get desperate. I could see them doing that. I'm also curious to see what the Jets do in terms of the draft. Like once this Aaron Rodgers trade gets done, do they try to flip Denzel Mims and maybe like a Bryce Hall for a late 3rd round pick on both of those days to try to replenish some of the draft capital? But I find it interesting too that basically the Jets, you knew that they were coming into Zach Wilson as the quarterback too. And the other big thing too was Ezekiel Elliott. Now, Adam Schefter last week reported that the Jets were one of the 3 teams interested in Zeke. Probably need to refrain that a little bit for the teams that Zeke was interested in, because Robert Saleh, who again, the Jets have left the door wide open on OBJ coming in. Robert Saleh on the Jets' interest in Zeke Elliott, we love our running back room. So basically, Robert Saleh basically said, yeah, we're good. Yeah, we don't need Zeke. I mean, you could tell, like, if he loves a player like Carl Lawson, he said, as long as he can walk and play, he will be here. And Carl Lawson, he's like, yes, they really want him. They also made it clear, Robert Saleh said, they are interested in Ben Jones. Like, they are telling you the players they're interested in, but not Zeke. And I do think it doesn't make sense for the Jets. Number one, Breece Hall, you're expecting a big comeback from. But what team do the Jets try to model themselves after? It's San Francisco. Now, San Francisco will play skill positions. They play Debo, they play George Kittle. And I think the Jets, if it's a wide receiver, a tight end, a dynamic playmaker, they'll pay them if they need it to. But running back is a funny position because you see the Jets and you see basically what the 49ers have done, and that's taking guys late in the draft or even undrafted free agents, and because they have a good line, a good scheme, they can get a lot of production. Ty Johnson coming back for the Jets, I think, is a nice depth, and the Jets have some decent depth. I think Michael Carter is an okay running back. I think he's a good role player, not necessarily if Breece goes down, but you also saw Zonovan Knight last year, Bam Knight, had some good reps down the edge of the season, actually got more touches than James Robinson. So I think the Jets have good depth, and I wouldn't rule out the Jets to not even draft a running back this year. If a good running back, like if they have a day 2 grade on a guy and he's sitting there in round 4 or 5, don't be surprised if the Jets go and get another running back. I could see them doing that as well. But I thought it was fascinating that the Jets were like, yeah, no, we're not interested in Zeke. And Zeke, in a weird way, might be a nice compliment on this team. But I think the Jets are still looking to have good, high-class locker room guys with Ben Jones. Now, OBJ has some issues off the field, but from what you hear, he's really good in the locker room. And the biggest thing with OBJ is it's a rental. You know it's a 1-year deal with OBJ. And the same thing with Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, they're not the best personalities you want in your locker room, but you're dating them. You're only going on basically a 1 or 2 year experience with them. You're not marrying them. You're not signing them to 5-year contracts. So I have absolutely no problem with that. But Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh laying out some of the groundwork. Carl Lawson looks to be a lock to come back. Corey Davis' future with the Jets a little bit up in the air, but it's clear the Jets still like him. They're interested in Ben Jones, not in Zeke. And look, I think it was smart for the Jets to put the Lamar Jackson rumors to bed, because I get that Lamar could be a backup option. Maybe if for some weird reason something goes sideways with the Aaron Rodgers deal, which I don't think is going to happen at this point, I don't think the Jets are going to have any interest in Lamar. And part of the reason with Lamar, before I get into your comments, is I don't think he fits this system. If you look at the offense, the West Coast system, we know Aaron Rodgers works incredibly well in the system. But more than that, this is a system that's designed to make the quarterback better. But the biggest thing is you need a quarterback that is a quick decision maker, gets the ball out quick, and is an efficient, accurate passer. Lamar Jackson is an unbelievable playmaker, but he is a home run hitter. The Jets want a quarterback. And yes, Aaron Rodgers has the arm to hit the home run. So did Zach Wilson. But they want a high batting average guy, a 65 to 70% completion passer to keep moving the ball down the field and keep the chains moving. And Lamar Jackson is more of a 220 hitter that can hit 40 jacks. He can hit the big play. But the Jets want a offense that's going to be sustainable and efficient. And I just don't think that I still think Lamar could be great in this offense. But what they're looking for, I just never thought that they really matched in terms of the skills and the timing. I just didn't think it'd be a good fit. All right, guys, let's get to your questions. Micro Fox, what does the Micro Fox say? Well, he says, I think they'll have to draft the QB this year and possibly the year after that. I don't think this year, but possibly next year. Oh, and also next year's quarterback class is a better class. So if you had to draft one, I'd try to look at next year. Tampa added Brady Gronk to 19 returning stars. Rams added Stafford Miller to 20 returning stars. Jets roster isn't ready. Joe, I kind of disagree. I don't think that their roster is at the point of those two, but you have a top 5 defense. And let's be honest, Joe, the AFC is a gauntlet. Like you're either competing or you're basically tanking at this point in the AFC because there's no in between. The AFC is a super conference now. And the Jets also proved that despite this, they were just a couple games away from missing the postseason with arguably the worst quarterback play in the entire league and having an offensive line that was completely decimated by injury. I mean, if you were to tell me that the Jets last year would lose basically the majority of their starting line, their best offensive tackle, their best offensive playmaker, Breece Hall, Zach Wilson would be an absolute unmitigated disaster. Mike White would basically have cracked ribs and be hurt after 2 games. Joe Flacco didn't want to play football anymore, and they had to even turn to Chris Streveler. And that the Jets were in playoff contention up to week 17, I would thought you were crazy. But this clearly shows that the Jets, like I know people say the Jets aren't ready. The Jets are on that doorstep right now in order to compete. Let's see. As an undrafted free agency, can you give me like what school he went to? The name just gave me right now. Ooh, Justin Jets. Always bringing the freaking haymakers, my man. I love this question. I would. And here's why. Yes, there's a lot of red flags right now with Jalen Carter. But if he is there at 13, and I'm going off the assumption that the top 3 tackles are off the board, we are talking about getting arguably the most talented player in the entire draft. Now, if the Jets feel he's bought in and he checks out personality-wise, and Robert Saleh believes he can get the most out of him, I just think it's too tempting because the Jets want to win with the front 4. And what would be great for this front 4 is if you get arguably the best interior defensive lineman in this draft, and you pair him with the best interior defensive lineman in the NFL right now in Quinnen Williams. That will be terrifying defensive front because not only will it make Quinnen better by having a great interior defensive tackle, but it makes your edges better. You get better one-on-one matchups. If Carter's there at 13, I even would go so far as to say if Carter somehow even gets to 10, maybe even the Jets consider going up. And look, every year we see this where a talented player falls out of the top 10, especially because of the quarterback. I really believe there's going to be 4 quarterbacks taken in the top 10, and that pushes everyone down the board, which no one talks about. The other thing I'm curious, though, with 13 is one of the things I've been hearing with the Jets could be that they might swap the first pick with the Packers. So, for example, the Rodgers deal might be the second-round pick or one of the second-round picks. Then they swap from 13 to 15. So the Jets propel down 2 spots because that's basically, in terms of the points, equivalent of a third-round pick. So basically it turns to the Jets giving up a second and a third rounder this year with potentially a pick next year So I'm curious to see if they drop down to there. But if he's there, I would draft him, Justin Jets. I'd love to hear your retort and what your thoughts would be on me. Jared, what's up, Jared? Zeke would be an immediate 2 behind Brees. That QB room is weak after Brees. I think you mean running back. I don't think it's weak. I do think the Jets, I would like to see them try to upgrade it. And I don't, once again, I don't think they'll rule out drafting a running back. I think Carter's a good change of pace back. Zonovan Knight, I think, has some really good upside. I really like Zonovan Knight. I think Zonovan Knight can be a really dynamic player in that room. And look, Ty Johnson is explosive. I don't like Lamar because the risk is too shaky. He cannot stay on the field. This could set the organization back. Like, look, Rodgers is going to set them back some draft picks, and they still have a chance to develop a quarterback, and it gives them flexibility because this is a short-term window. Lamar, you're committing 5-6 years potentially, and if he gets hurt, you're screwed. Jalen will not be there past 5. I don't know because I really believe you're going to see potentially 4 quarterbacks in the first 4 picks. I know it's crazy, but we know Carolina's taking a QB. We know Houston's taking a QB. We know Arizona wants to trade out and a team will try to jump Indy to get a QB. Now, Arizona might look at Carter. Seattle could be intriguing because depending on how the quarterbacks fall, I could see them maybe loving a guy. It also depends on where Will Anderson goes because I feel Anderson's going to go before Carter. Then the question becomes, especially 6 through 12, who wants a quarterback or who wants a lineman? Because I do think you're going to see a run on the 3 top linemen between picks 6 and 12 or 13 where the Jets are. So, but I could still see Carter falling. Like every year, there's always someone that falls way down the board. Look, I get it, Jared, but we also have to remember he's had a terrible pro day. He's gained weight this offseason. And he had the off the field issue. Like there's some teams that might be scared to take him early. So there's a chance. Like every year, there's always a prospect we never expect to fall. And they do. No one thought Micah Parsons would get out of the top 5. He fell to the Cowboys at 11 every year. And he didn't have off the field issues. Mike cost Jets all the time. I foresee Joe Douglas trading pick 13 and moving back in the draft and acquiring extra piece for this year and next. They are targeting Antoine Harrison. Darnell Wright's a good OT. I could see the Jets trading down. The thing, though, is they need a win this year. So if there's a player that they feel can help them, and don't forget, too, at 13, there's a good chance you can get a top 10 player, maybe even a top 8 talent that falls down the board to there. If they trade back, I almost feel like depending on what happens with the center position, John Michael Smith's out of Minnesota could be an interesting pick. I mean, the Jets have already on some of their meetings right now with the prospects. So I'm just checking on who the Jets have met with already this year. Just give me a second. I have the list. So far the Jets have met. They've had a private workout with Dwayne McBride, the running back from UAB. I know that they've had John Michael Smith in. The Jair Brown, the safety from Penn State at the Combine. Ventrell Miller, the linebacker from Florida. They were at his pro day. Now, the big one's John Michael Smith because not only have the Jets met with him at the Combine, they've been to his workout and his private workout. So here's the thing with him. I believe he's going to go in the 20 to 30 range. Now, could the Jets trade back? Absolutely. But another option on the table is could the Jets trade back into the first round? That's one of the reasons I also really believe that they made the deal with the Browns because it gives them the flexibility of if they trade one of those 2 picks, they still will have 42 or 43. And what that means is what the Jets can do is trade back into potentially the first round. So I think that is something to keep an eye on. And I think that the Jets might do that for John Michael Smith. Now, I think he's an unbelievable talent. Um, I do think that he could be someone that's really good on the board. He's a top center on my board, but if the Jets want, they're either going to have to do one of two things. That's either trade back or trade back into the first round. So let's see. Carter, I believe Melvin believes Carter will be gone third. I don't think it's a possibility to. And take BJ. I think you mean Jones the tackle. I'm pretty sure that's who you're referring to. Yeah, everyone hit that like button. Give us a smash. I think Skoronski will be the pick. I don't think he's going to be there by the time the Jets pick. I think he's going top 10. I think if you want him, you're going to have to trade up. Let's see. I don't think so, and here's why. I think he's the top center on this board. And once we get past pick 20, there's a lot of teams that are in that upgradable range. Like I'm looking right now, Tampa Bay, I think, would be a stretch at 19 for a center, but Seattle's at 20. They love offensive linemen. The Chargers protecting, obviously, their asset in Justin Herbert. Jacksonville, I think, needs to still continue the offensive line and get that better in front of Trevor Lawrence. The Giants at 25. Like, I think, depending on what happens, I know everyone's screaming that the Giants need a playmaker at 25, but that offensive line still needs work. I like the kid Torrance, the guard from Florida, but that could be a place where John Michael Schmitz goes is the Giants at 25. Buffalo at 27. They still need to work on their offensive line. Could Cincinnati look to upgrade the center position? New Orleans at 29. Philadelphia, their offensive line. I think 30 could also be a spot too because the Eagles have so many picks. Don't forget too, Kelsey is coming back, but I don't know how much longer he's going to have. They're starting to get long in the tooth. So there's a couple teams I think that could take John Michael Smith in that 20 to 31 range. So if he does get to round 2, though, I do think there will be a team that will really try to get up and get to him. So, like, I'm just bringing up my draft order right now. I mean, Pittsburgh at 32, they desperately need offensive linemen. They could take him. Houston needs offensive line. Help Arizona. Like, you look at the top of that second round. If he somehow gets out of the first round, he's not getting past. I don't think he's getting past the top 35 picks unless you go up and get him. Let's see. I still missing more Berrios and Mike White. I get it, Melvin. I know Mike White was a fan favorite, but you can't fault him for taking that opportunity. Berrios, they basically subsidized with Hardman, who's a more explosive player than Berrios. And look, Moore's a frustrating one. I get it. My biggest thing with the Moore trade, I don't know if you saw this, Melvin, when I was doing the live. My thoughts on Moore was that, yes, it was about getting the draft pick. Yes, it was about getting the draft capital for Aaron Rodgers, but two things really stuck out to me. Number one, Joe Douglas did say that teams did start calling about Elijah Moore once the Hardman signing was official. The league will tell you your value. And the league basically said that they didn't view Elijah Moore maybe as talented as we did. I think Elijah Moore still has tremendous upside, but the league was telling you, because look at where he went. He went to Cleveland. You felt like you didn't get as much back as you likely should have. Actually, three things. Number two, he's going to Cleveland. They've been a great judge of character. And that goes into the third thing with the character is Elijah Moore, I understand, had differences with this offense and was frustrated with this offense. But this was a team last year that was winning and had one of the best records in the AFC at the time when he demanded a trade. Elijah Moore could potentially have been buried in this offense behind Hardman, behind Lazard, behind Garrett Wilson. Like, there was a good chance the best he was going to be was the fourth receiver on this depth chart. And I think the Jets were worried about him in that locker room. And it's clear the guys on the Jets love this guy. And I do think that that is frustrating. But what I believe is Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh took a calculated risk that, number one, they already had their stud receiver. It's Garrett Wilson. Number two, you're not going to be able to pay both Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore if Elijah Moore is great. And I think Garrett Wilson's a better player. And number three, I don't think they wanted a blow up. And they understand that with Aaron Rodgers, if you don't run the right routes, if you give up on a route, which Elijah Moore did at times last year, he's going to bury you in this offense, and you don't want a blow up like that during the season. So that's one of the reasons I think the trade was made in that regard. Trade down from 13, get an extra second to replace second use for Rodgers. Also, will get us a third rounder back for more. And that's a little bit high, Jacob. I think you could probably get, if you traded to keep a first round pick, like to jump back into the 20s, you probably could get a third round pick to recuperate that loss. So then you'd still have a 1, a 2, and a 3. But also, I think the Jets have done a good job of filling a lot of holes. So if they can get a really great impact player at 13, it might be hard for them to turn down. Not many teams go for a center in round 1 historically. Yeah, but this also isn't a super deep draft in terms of centers. A lot of these centers are also kind of hybrid guards. And look, the offensive line play in the NFL has been bad. So if you can get a good offensive lineman, I think that they're going to take it wherever you can get. Third round conditional pick next year will be the other Green Bay pick we'll get. I do think that that's something that be considered. Yeah, Linderbaum went last year. I just have a feeling that when I look in that 20s, I see a couple teams that need centers or interior offensive linemen, and he's one of the best in this entire draft. And once you get past 20, you've gone away from some of the dynamic receivers. Maybe there's a couple of receivers in the 20s, but the dynamic pass rushers are off the board. Some of the better corners are off the board. Some of the best offensive linemen are off the board. So then you're starting to get into that range where there's a lot of good players, but not really great players. And Schmitz, I think, is a guy that you can pencil him in. He's going to start day 1 and likely could be a 10-year starter. And at that point in the draft, you'd sign up for that. Absolutely. I can't either. That's one of the reasons I can't do the damn mock drafts, though, Melvin. I want to do my mock drafts for the Jets, but I can't because I don't know what they're going to do. Like I've at this time, I'm always doing mock drafts, but I kind of can't because I'm hamstringed because I don't want to do a mock draft because I got to figure out what they're giving up for Rodgers. Once that goes through, I'm like, okay, I have an idea and what to play with. But right now I'm like come on, guys, like give me something, please. Anything, please. So Jacob Klein, Moore was a cancer. Wanting a trade during a winning streak was stupid. I don't care if Zach Wilson is garbage. Yeah, Jacob, I always think that rubs people the wrong way. And look, Robert Saleh is a player's coach, but he says he wants people that are committed and he wants people that buy into his program. And Elijah Moore, unfortunately, whether he meant it or not, came off as a me guy last year instead of a we guy. And don't forget, too, Denzel Mims, another second-round wide receiver, was buried, wasn't even active on the depth chart, did request a trade, but it was for an obvious reason. He wasn't even on the active roster. But I do think the Jets, in a weird way, respected Mims more because he continued to come to work, didn't say anything, didn't grumble, didn't become a distraction. Elijah Moore became a distraction. And a part of me also wonders if ownership was pissed about that as well, because you have to go back to that time where they come off beating Green Bay. They're at the top of the AFC. It's the biggest win, and you could make a case probably 10 years for the organization. This is a week that you can celebrate the tide turning, the Jets turning the page, the Jets becoming a competitor, the Jets becoming a model franchise, the Jets finally going in the right direction. And instead, that whole week was about Elijah Moore wants a trade. Can you believe the Jets sent Elijah Moore? What is going on with the Jets? Of course, the Jets would be the one team that has a winning streak and a player wants out. So that, to me, I think irked not only the coaching staff, but people in the organization. And once you do something like that, it's hard to forget. And the other thing, too, is if Elijah Moore, like I kept saying for people freaking out the Jets didn't get more. If Elijah Moore was really that coveted by teams around the league, you don't think the Jets would have gotten more? And who was the one team that the Jets pulled the trade off with? It was Cleveland. Cleveland's been a team that we've seen in the last 12 months hasn't exactly been the best judge of characters. They don't care about the character. You can't tell me that the Jets called Green Bay and put Elijah Moore in a deal to try to save them a draft pick or two. And the Packers, who are good judges of character and receivers, are like, Now we don't want it. You don't think it's a little bit odd that now Carolina, that has absolutely zero receivers for their young quarterback, wasn't like, hey, we could use a receiver? There's a lot of teams that need receivers, and this is not a great receiver draft. And that was the one offer the Jets, the best offer the Jets got. Because Joe Douglas took the best offer he could get. So I do think that is important. Moore was going to be distracted, so we did get the ball. Jets are trying to make – yeah, like that's the thing. Like if in the first 3 weeks, if Moore gives up on routes and Rodgers isn't targeting him, like I think the Jets felt he was going to be a distraction. Yeah, Creed Humphreys, like I loved Creed Humphreys. He was someone I was very high on my board. I'm always higher on centers. Like, look, center is the position in the NFL that doesn't get enough credit because it's a difficult position. It's becoming more valuable because of how good interior defensive pass rushers have been. But it's a quarterback of the offensive line. They're the ones making the play calls. And if you have a great center, it makes everyone better. That's one of the reasons, like, I don't think Nick Mangold got enough of the appreciation because he was great for so long. And the Jets, since losing him, have never been able to really fill that ball. I think Connor McGovern did a solid job, but you could tell, like, the Jets, when they were at their best offensive lines, who was anchoring it? It was Kevin Mawai and it was Nick Mangold. It was two unbelievable great centers and really great cerebral centers as well. I'm glad Moore's gone. They do not need another locker room diva, especially knowing at 5'8". Look, I think he's going to do well in Cleveland. He's going to fit into that slot receiver role. And look, I don't love giving up on young receivers and cheap receivers because you had them under contract for 2 years. But the other thing with the draft is, if there's a position that you can find later in the NFL draft and that you can develop, it's wide receiver. The draft gives you so many wide receivers every single season. Maybe not great, but in terms of depth, like you can find receivers on day 3 of the draft. You can find dynamic receivers on day 2 of the draft. So I think it's a position where the Jets will look into upgrading as well. Broderick Jones at 13, day 1 star. I think Skoronski off the board. I think there's a chance the 3 linemen are off the board too by the 13. I could see the Jets having to get up to 10 or 11 to try to get an offensive lineman. I like Paris Johnson too. But here's the thing. Like, I just have a feeling that with the offensive line, there's going to be a run between 6 and 10, and the Jets might have to jump up to get there. I think that was the turning point in the season. I just mentioned the Jets were on a roll with Zach Wilson. I think Zach started regressing from the point Moore started complaining. I think the turning point was it was a turning. I still think it's the second New England game where you have an unbelievable defensive performance. Zach Wilson plays horrible for the second time against the Patriots. That to me was the turning point in the comments after the game. Like, that to me was the turning point of the Jets season. But I get it. I do think that it was a major turning point. Maybe not the biggest, but it was definitely a turning point. I think the Jets shot more, and the only value they could get for him is from a team. Yeah, exactly, Jared. You read my mind on that. Look, like, and I do think, yes, if Mangold or Cam, but those are general talents. Like, they are good talents. Like, I think John Michael Smith, though, is a 10-year starter, though. And right now in the NFL, you can find 10-year starters in the offensive line. You do it. Jets have 5 returning starters from 2021. They've drafted 0 drafted players playing on a contract. It takes time for a team to gel. Draft 3 players. What do you mean it takes time to gel? Draft 3 players. In this draft, they're going to draft more than 3 players. If you could just elaborate, Joe, just so I can understand a little bit of the question. I don't think they're going to get one, Melvin. I get it, but the thing with the quarterbacks is I still think the Jets have some holes and depth holes. Look, Zach Wilson, they said yesterday, he's going to be the QB2. And I know people hate that. But you carried 2 quarterbacks. So it doesn't make sense for the Jets unless they really feel that guy is that great. But I don't really see that. I like Tanner McGee from Stanford. And look, I really love Hendon Hooker. But the more I think about Hendon Hooker, I think Hendon Hooker is going to be a first-round pick. I think he is going to be kind of what Lamar Jackson was a couple years ago, where you had a team trading for the final first-round pick or one of the final first-round picks because they like him, but more importantly, so they can get the 5th-year option, where they're taking a risk. Like, yeah, we know this is a gamble, but if he hits, we'd rather not have to pay him for an extra year at the 5th-year option than than have only 4 years if he's after a first round pick. So I wouldn't be surprised, like bold take, I wouldn't be surprised if Hooker goes like with one of the last 3 or 4 picks in the first round. But it's for a team that trades back in. So like if I'm looking at the draft order now, like teams that are kind of in that firing range, Arizona, I don't think would do it just because of Kyler. But if Indianapolis doesn't take a quarterback first, maybe. The Rams could be a weird team because they have the 36th pick. Stafford's been banged up. Maybe he's someone that they target. Maybe the Raiders, if they don't take a quarterback in the first round at 38, jump back up into 31. There's a couple teams I could see like maybe would consider it. Maybe even Tennessee at 41 jumps all the way back in so they have someone to compete with Malik Willis. I mean, they're not paying Malik Willis anything. So I do think Hendon Hooker could be someone out there. What's the more realistic of the veterans we should sign? OBJ, Calais Campbell, Ben Jones. Also, thanks for bringing up Calais Campbell. He's meeting with the Jets this week, which I think is huge. I don't think they're going to sign Mercedes Lewis, maybe Randall Cobb, but a lot of it's depending. Look, if they sign OBJ, they're not signing Randall Cobb, I don't think. If I had to pick between the top 3, OBJ probably the least likely, just because of it depends on his contract. Ben Jones, he's got to clear the medicals because of the concussion issue. If he clears the medicals, I think the Jets, he's high on the list. Campbell kind of almost feels like Jason Taylor for like the Jets in the late 2010s, where still not the same player he was, but still highly productive, would obviously help on that defensive line, especially on the interior, and really is kind of ring chasing at this point of his career, but also brings a great veteran presence. I wouldn't be surprised to get all 3. And look, I think they'll finagle the cat to fit them all in there. But for Lewis, I think it's a bit of a long shot just with all the depth they have at tight end. Randall Cobb, I think, is kind of a backup as well. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. I love Streveler, but he's maybe as a backup. I do not think Hooker goes in first round. Just missed out. Look, I'm thinking he could go just because, again, he might not be a first-round talent, but if a team has him as a high second-round talent, they might view it as a situation kind of like what the Eagles did. Like if they feel like Jalen Hurts is sitting there, and the Eagles probably regret not getting Hurts in the first round because they have to pay him a year early. If there's a team that likes Hooker a lot, and there could be, I'm just saying it might be worth it to them to get him, even if they don't think he's a first-round quarterback, but a high second-round quarterback. Might be worth it just to make sure you get that fifth-year option in there. So that's the reason why I could see him going there. Anyone take a running back with the torn ACL in the first round are crazy. But the thing, Jacob, is he's coming back. It seems like he's ahead of schedule. He might be ready to go for opening week. And I'm not saying you're drafting Hendon Hooker. I don't think the team that's drafting Hendon Hooker he's going to be the starter. I think they're viewing him as the backup or developmental quarterback a bit. And the reason I'm saying a first round, like there's a difference between a first round pick. I'm not saying you're going to take him top 10. I'm saying you're taking him with the 31st or 30th pick. I mean, basically at that point, once you get past pick 20, 21, 22, basically late first round players are usually second round talents, but it's just more of the fit. So if you have a high second round grade on Hendon Hooker, and you think you can develop into a very good starting quarterback, like let's say you're the Raiders in the second round, you don't know if Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be really healthy and you need an eventual quarterback, yeah, you might do it just because you get that fifth-year option. It's worth you sacrificing an extra pick if you hit on the quarterback in order to not have to pay him for an extra year. So I agree. I don't think he's a first-round grade, Jacob, but you have to think about the financials, and you look at how much quarterbacks are getting paid. If you feel he can be your starting quarterback, it behooves you to take him in the first round and save a little bit money and give yourself an extra year. You got to let Zach get opportunities as a back, even if we're not keeping him for it, raise his trade value. Look, I think the Jets, their hope is that you drafted a quarterback with top 5 potential. You're hoping, and a lot of it, and Connor Hughes was great covering this because we had him on Sirius XM, that even the Jets don't know what happened because of the mechanical issues. Like these were some that Zach never had. I do think they're hoping this reset helps. Like in a perfect world, Aaron Rodgers plays for a year or two, and then they move to Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson has figured out the mechanics, and is the Jets starting quarterback for 10 years. Worst case scenario, Jets see he's not getting better, and they move on to a different player. But he's going to be the backup. Let's see. If Zach comes, Zach will not see a snap unless in preseason or injury, so that's pretty much out. No, I think you'll see some snaps in practice. Don't forget, too, Rodgers might not be in some of the early workouts. And look, in training camp, I think you're going to see Rodgers get a couple of reps, but I think you're going to see Zach Wilson get a lot of reps in the preseason. I think you're going to see him get a ton of the reps, and they're going to use it as an evaluation of seeing, like, okay, maybe not the production on the field, but are his mechanics better? Is he reading the field better? Is he seeing things better? I think it's really going to be mechanics. Is his foot placement good? Is his ball placement better? Is he hitching? Is he hitting the easy layups? Like, that's going to be what you're going to see there as well. I don't think he's going to have anything to do with the trade value. I don't think you're going to get much for Zach anyway. Is Hooker's ADP even that high anywhere? Maybe I missed something. I don't think it's necessarily that high, but if you had to ask people, we know who the top 4 quarterbacks are. Hooker's kind of that Tanner McGee, that next round of quarterbacks after Will Levis. The reason I'm just saying I could see Hooker going in the first round is just so a team gets an option. Like, look, he could easily go in the second round too. I could see a team sitting there, like, if he's sitting there, there's a couple teams in the second round that would probably love to have him. But the only reason I say a late first round pick is maybe team values having that 5th year of control. If we have Rodgers, you take the QB with the highest upside and not the most polished guy either this year, next. Yeah, but by the time that happens, the second round, those quarterbacks are gone. Maybe next year, but not this year. Corey Davis will be traded on draft day for a 3rd round pick, June Smith. I don't think that happens because the problem with Davis is it's one of those situations where I think a lot of teams would rather wait for the Jets to just cut him. If the Jets don't trade him for Aaron Rodgers, and if he's not cut before the draft, one scenario I could see is the Jets love carrying a lot of wide receivers. I think the Jets are going to try to move on from Mims as well. But an idea that could be floated around is you keep Corey Davis on this roster, and every year we see major players go down in training camp across the league. Maybe there's a situation where a team's number 2 or number 1 receiver goes down with like an ACL, and then all of a sudden the Jets have Corey Davis and they can get a higher draft pick during that process. So it'll be something to keep an eye on. I'm curious to see what happens with Corey Davis, but it does appear that Carl Lawson will be back. Again, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. We got a lot done today. Looking forward to seeing you next time. If you're joining us after the video, make sure you give us a comment. Make sure you ask your questions. I'll get to them in the next video. If you're new to the channel, bash that like, bash that subscribe button. And guys, those of you in the chat, I want to get your thoughts. Go to the community page right now on YouTube, and I have a poll up. Who would you rather have the Jets trade for? Aaron Rodgers or Lamar Jackson? I'd love to get your feedback. But again, guys, you were awesome as always. Appreciate you guys. Help make this channel what it is. Really appreciate the feedback. And I will have mock drafts coming, hopefully soon, because hopefully they figure out the Aaron Rodgers trade. But until next time, I'm Nolan Rich, and this is Rich Sports Talk. Thank you so much for joining us here today.